Happy Friday morning, everybody. Welcome to the Rotowire Fantasy Football Podcast, the DFS version. I am Scott Jenstad, joined as always on Friday mornings by Ryan Belangi. I have a mental block. I actually thought it in my head beforehand. Belangi. Ryan, how are you? Sorry about that.
Hey, I'm good. It's not your fault. It does not.
It's kind of my fault. The name hasn't changed. I just can't figure out a way to I just choke right when I get to the big moment.
It's okay. It does not look like how it sounds. But yeah, anyways, doing good. Looking forward to getting into the slate today. Just a quick sort of recap about last week, if there's anything we can learn.
You mean the weirdest NFL week of all time?
Yep. It's just another week. I know I bring this up a lot, but I will always bring this up. There's never such a thing as a lock in the NFL. Zeke was the chalky running back. I mean, he did okay, but kind of busted. I think he finished with 11 points or something, sort of got a few at the end. Amari Cooper had 2 catches. Tyreek Hill was the most popular expensive receiver. He had his worst game of the season. The Cowboys had a 30 implied total. They had 0 points midway through the fourth quarter. So yeah, it's just another reminder.
You left out the fact that the Bills scored 6 points against the Jaguars. Like that's
right.
It's impossible. It was just a weird. We always talk about how this week is weird in the NFL. This season's weird in the NFL. I get it. Like we always say that, but last week actually was really weird.
Right. I didn't even think of Josh Allen because almost everybody, didn't get there. But yeah, it's just. I had a bad week last week, maybe my worst of the season. I feel like that's the second time on this podcast I've said that now. But it's just a reminder to, get off the chalk. I know, at least for me, sometimes we get married to certain plays that you feel like they just have to get there. They're in such good spots, but especially for GPPs, it kind of just makes sense to fade, the chalkiest running back or the chalkiest receiver. I mean, yeah, sometimes they're going to get there, but most of the time, they're not. We've seen, the quote unquote best plays bust, at least 50% of the time, especially recently. And in tournaments, there's just huge edge to playing somebody else. Like, for example, Nick Chubb, who was in a great spot last week. Most people played Zeke or even went cheaper than that, and Chubb goes off. Stuff like that happens every week. So just don't ever think that there's guys you have to play. I think that's just the main takeaway.
Yeah. I actually weirdly did pretty well last week. I was profitable I think it was a little bit down on one side and good profitable on the other side. I played Herbert and Lamar Jackson though. So it was one of those things that I avoided some of the landmines. I avoided Mahomes. I avoided Josh Allen, which was nice. I had Chubb on my main FanDuel team and my secondary DraftKings team, I think. So I ended up with Cordell Patterson too. Like as the week went on, I looked at Patterson. I just thought the price was too cheap. But I had a lot of Zeke. I had some receivers that didn't show up, so I didn't really dominate. But it turned out pretty good for a weird week. I was just the Herbert. I had Herbert and Allen in one team, which is great, and I had Herbert and Williams on the other team, which not as good because Williams was not as involved. But it was my boy Herbert finally stepped up for me. That was nice.
Yeah, that was a great play. Well, yeah, nice that you profited. This shows how really bad I did. I had Lamar Jackson on about 90% of my lineups, and yet I think I got about $150 back on 2,400 entries for about a negative 95% ROI, even with the top QB. So right. We're going to try to do better this week.
Yeah, it was a strange week. And I mean, it's good. I mean, you obviously have a lot of profitable weeks, so it's good to kind of people know that not everybody wins every week, and not even the people who really know what they're talking about win every week. So it's good to the transparency is always really good, and I appreciate that. We want to thank our sponsor, WinBet, for their sponsorship of the podcast all year long. They're our exclusive sponsor for Rotowire's Fantasy Football Podcast. We appreciate them for that. But let's look at Week 10. We have 11 games on our main slate this week. We have 7 early, 4 late. We have 4 teams on bye: the Bears, Bengals, Giants, and Texans. Aside the Bengals, there not a big loss in terms of bye week, so it's not one that hurts us there. Primetime games, we had the thrilling Baltimore-Miami game last night. I say thrilling as much sarcasm as possible because the game was got a little interesting late, but a truly awful football game for the first three quarters, and one that I'm glad that we miss on this slate. Kansas City and Las Vegas, a really interesting real-world football game because I don't know what the Chiefs are going to look like, and it seems like teams have quote-unquote figured out the Chiefs' offense, but at some point, I think the Andy Reid and Mahomes are going to figure it out back. But that game's Sunday night. And the Rams and the 49ers is Monday night. I don't want to talk about it, so we're just going to skip that because I can't talk about the 49ers at the moment. So that's going to be the Rams are only favored by 4 in that game. I don't like to give out betting advice, but I think the Rams are going to win that game by double digits. So even in San Francisco, I think the 49ers home crowd is going to be muted this week. I just think that I think people are pretty upset and people are frustrated, and I think that the Rams are going to roll in there and win, unfortunately. So, but let's jump into this slate that we have. We got a handful of games that are high numbers. Last week we only had one game was over 50. We have 3 this week plus a 49.5. I think the game that everybody's going to be clamoring over is Atlanta and Dallas at 54.5. Are you as fired up for that game as everybody else seems to be in the fantasy landscape at least?
Yeah, I mean I like that game. How could you not? But I'm not overly excited. Okay. Maybe I'm not as excited as most, and that's just because we haven't had, like you mentioned, we haven't had a lot of good targets the past few weeks. I counted 6 out of the 11 games that I'd be okay with doing some sort of stack with. Oh, nice. So we'll get into that later. But yeah, I mean, the Cowboys have the highest total. They disappointed everybody last week. I think people will go back to them. Atlanta's a better matchup than Denver was. But
I was going to say, do you go back to Dallas and Buffalo as a DFS player? How do you feel about these offenses? Like, just completely bust one week. Are you worried at all, or you just go back and figure it's any given Sunday kind of stuff?
Yeah, I lean towards more that it's any given Sunday. The Cowboys had been pretty good. Usually, you get a game like this, even for the best teams, once or twice a year. I think it's okay, and there's a lot of pressure now, sort of, for Dallas to bounce back. So you got to figure they're going to come out and, I don't know. I would assume play much better. So yeah, it does look like a good bounce back spot, and it's a great opponent for a bounce back. So yeah, that'll be a popular game, and rightfully so.
And then we have the Vikings at the Chargers at 53. We have Tampa Bay, Washington at 51.5. And then probably the most interesting, like, on paper game, just because both quarterbacks are supposed to be returning this week. We have Seattle at Green Bay, 49.5. I think that game the total's obviously going to go up a little bit if Rodgers plays. It sounds like he can return to practice on Saturday. I assume after watching Jordan Love for a game last week that they're going to go right back to Rodgers pretty quickly and try and get him in there no matter what. Russell Wilson has been practicing, says he's coming back this week from the finger injury. Of those 3 games, is there anybody that jumps out to you like more than Atlanta, Dallas? Are you kind of like all of them? Where do you fall in these other high total games?
Yeah, I think all 3 look good. If Godwin and Antonio Brown are out for Tampa, I would really like the Tampa Bay game just because you don't have to guess on who to target. You can play Mike Evans, and there's some decent plays on Washington. You can play Brady too. So I would like that game because it's sort of an easy stack. You just know what to do. The Chargers Vikings game too. I think, out of all the games with the high totals, that one probably has the best chance to stay close, at least, probably like a good chance to shoot out. There's
I love that game, by the way.
Yeah, Herbert and the Chargers are in a great spot, and so is Dalvin Cook going up against one of the worst run defenses in football. So that looks like a good game. And then Rodgers and Russell Wilson is much better than Geno Smith and Jordan Love. So I think you can play that game too. There's a lot of options.
Yeah, and on your Tampa Bay note, it looked like Chris Godwin might practice today, Friday, so he's up in the air. But it sounds like he's going to be kind of a true game time decision. And then I don't think Antonio Brown's going to play. I saw a quote yesterday, doesn't seem close to returning, so I don't think he's going to play. But you're right. If Godwin doesn't play, it definitely narrows the passing tree. You kind of pick guys a lot easier. And Gronkowski's questionable too. So what their team looks like today at practice might be a lot different than what it looks like on Sunday. But it's a good point on the fact that maybe guys not playing makes the game a lot easier to stack, because the Tampa Bay receivers are really hard to figure out when all of them are healthy. It's just you kind of feel like you're just kind of picking with nothing behind it. So. Some low totals. We do have a batch of those. We have 2 games that are 45, Cleveland at New England, Philly at Denver. We have a 44.5, New Orleans at Tennessee. We got Carolina, Arizona, 44.5, thanks to the Carolina bad offense that they have been struggling the last month. And then we got at the bottom, we got the Steelers again at the bottom, maybe 42.5, Detroit and Pittsburgh, which projects as a really gross offensive game.
Yeah, those bottom games going to have even less interest in than most weeks. Just when there's so many good games to target, the opportunity cost is just so much higher. You're going to, 1 or 2 or 3 of those appealing targets are going to go off, and you're going to have trouble with those low total games on slates where there's more options. So a few games I think we can just cross off.
There's some pick and choose plays in that batch of 5, but a lot of those games, as I scrolled through, I'm like, nope, and I just I kind of moved on. But how do you generally feel, as a person that does this all the time, about a returning quarterback? So we have Wilson and Rodgers going to be the hype game. I think it's the Fox afternoon game with Buck and Aikman. But how do you feel about? I mean, Rodgers only missed a week, but do you worry about his conditioning? Do you worry about? And obviously, you don't know how his COVID case is. We don't know. It's a question you can't answer. But how do you feel about someone like Wilson too, coming back from what is this 5 or 6 weeks of injury? How do you generally feel about guys coming back in? Do you want to wait a week? Do you play them right away? Are these guys Hall of Fame-ish enough that you don't care and you're ready to play them? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I'm more on the side of play them right away, especially if it's a guy like Rodgers or, Hall of Fame guys, for instance, Brady, those types. Yeah, they don't need to practice. If they're playing, they're 100%, they're ready to go. It's kind of similar to how I feel about guys that are questionable going into Sunday. I know a lot of guys that don't like to play questionable guys, but you're going to get a little bit of an ownership discount on those guys. And I usually go with if a guy's active and starting, then he's good enough to roster. And it's worked out for the most part. Russell Wilson, that might be a little different. I could see having a little trepidation. He's missed a lot of time. But I still it wouldn't take me off of him, I guess. I don't know. How do you feel?
Yeah, I feel the same way. And with Wilson, give me a finger injury over a, coming back from a knee or a hamstring or something that his pop. And he's saying I don't think Seattle's throwing him out there unless the doctors actually clear him and his fingers fine. So I don't really worry about the ball coming off his hands. I think that if he's playing, he's fine. It's not something that I worry about him re-injuring. I mean, sure, he could hit someone's helmet, but that could happen no matter what anyway. I don't think his injury makes it more likely to get injured again. So I like that fact that whereas, running backs with a hamstring or receivers with a hamstring, that sort of thing, I always am a little worried. I don't want to flip on the game in the first quarter and we'll see him limping to the sideline. But with a quarterback, the way they protect the quarterbacks, the way I assume Pete Carroll will make sure to protect him, I'm not that worried about that. With Rodgers, it seems like his, who knows if Rodgers is telling the truth anymore, but his symptoms don't seem to be overly serious. I think he's going to be fine in that regard. So as long as he's looks good to go, I'm fine with him too. Before we do jump into slate, someone is in the chat. I appreciate questions. Ryan, what should they do? Would you rather have the trade is Dalvin for Zeke and T. Higgins? I'm taking Zeke and T. Higgins just because I have no idea what's happening with Dalvin the rest of the year. And if you can give me Zeke and T. Higgins right now, I'd probably take it.
Yeah, I would too. I mean, you could make an argument that Zeke could have more fantasy points than Dalvin from here on out, and you kind of just get T. Higgins for free then. Yeah, that's
and the question marks with Dalvin. Obviously, Dalvin had the legal stuff this week. I mean, it seems like he's I'm not even getting into it, but he's claiming he's a victim. He's playing as it goes along, but there's enough risk in there. There's enough stuff in there that I would just I would take the trade, and I think I'd kind of since the offer is so good, I think I'd take the Dalvin risk off the table if I were in a trade league with that. So thanks for the question, Smokey the Cat. We always appreciate that. Ryan, let's jump into like who we think the kind of the popular optimal plays are. Who's going to be popular in cash lineups? Jump a couple guys per position there before we get into some stacks and some mid-range receivers for your tournament lineups. Starting at quarterback, it seems to me that the two guys that are dropped in price a little bit and struggled last week are Josh Allen and Dak Prescott. Josh Allen 7,900 on DraftKings, Dak Prescott 6,900. I think both these guys coming off bad games will be popular. We see quarterback, nobody's ever that uber popular. Do you like these two guys? Because I think they're kind of the two that I started with as I was looking at the quarterback position.
Yeah, definitely. I think Josh Allen would be the top option. I'm not sure we're going to have the salary to get up to him, but if you can, I would have no problem with Josh Allen. Someone like Dak that's where I'm looking. It's a good price, like you mentioned, coming off a bad game. And then in the middle of those two, I think you could go to Justin Herbert also. I mean, if
you can always go to Justin Herbert.
Yeah, if you're on Dak and have $400, you can go up to Herbert. I wouldn't mind that. QB, it's not as straightforward as say last week when you just put Lamar in. Going a little bit lower, I think people will consider Hurts, but I don't love it. I'm not necessarily a Hurts guy, and I think it's kind of a tough matchup. And he's shown recently that he's not the lock for 20 points that we might have thought he was based on his early performances in the season. The Eagles have, he's been throwing less. They've they've been playing a bit differently. I don't know. You can go there because of his rushing upside. And then
I think the scary thing with Hurts, just jump in there, sorry, is that I think that the Eagles have shown too, like if they get in the right game script, they're gonna run the clock, they're gonna pound it, they're gonna keep the ball out of his hands, at least like throwing a lot. I mean, he's thrown, I think he's 33 passes the last 2 weeks. Like it just, the upside is always there with Hurts, but I feel like the floor is a lot lower than it was than we thought maybe 3 weeks ago, just because of the way they've been playing.
Yeah, I agree. So, if I was on Hurts, I would find the 400 to get up to Dak. I think it's definitely worth it. Or else you could save some money and go to maybe Carson Wentz. He's in a great spot at home against Jacksonville for 5,900. His salary just never seems to go up really, even though he sort of keeps doing well for the most part. I mean, he's putting up over 20 almost every week. Yeah, let me see. Multiple touchdown passes now in 6 straight weeks, including 3 the last 2 weeks, and just a great matchup at home to Jacksonville.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, I'm looking at Dak and maybe Wentz if I need the salary. What do you think?
Yeah, I love Dak this week. I'm going to be a lot of we'll get into stacks later. I like the Herbert stack too, but I like Dak and CeeDee Lamb a lot this week. I've been playing a lot of that. I think that I'm a little more worried about Josh Allen up 1,000. I think Josh Allen's gonna be really good, but he's just pricey. Coming off the home game against Jacksonville, they do play the Jets, which is really nice, but it's just a game that they're favored big, and if they get up, who knows what we see. But Josh Allen he was a quarterback 1 like 3 of the last 5 weeks. But you wonder a little bit if they're playing the same kind of defense the teams are playing the Chiefs to just run it and beat us short, and we're not going to let you beat us deep. And if it's working a little bit, I think that Allen will be fine. But I think I'd save the 1,000 and play Dak if I'm picking one. But I want to see this game. It'd be interesting to see what the Bills kind of counter punch back with the way teams are playing them. But let's jump into running backs. I think running back is really interesting this week. But first, a note from our sponsors at WynnBET. There's one thing we appreciate here at Rotowire. It's making good decisions, and even more so making the right decision. Listen up. I have an incredible offer for you with Rotowire's newest partner, WynnBET, the premier digital casino and sportsbook app. WynnBET is now the exclusive sponsor for Rotowire's Fantasy Podcast. WynnBET brings you all the latest action with a user-friendly interface, moneyline bets, boosted parlays, over-unders, round robins, live betting, and so much more, all at your fingertips. Want to break from sports betting? Head into WynnBET's digital casino and take a spin on roulette, double down, and blackjack, slam the slots, or try your hand at baccarat. WynnBET is currently available in 6 states: Colorado, Indiana, Michigan, New Jersey, Tennessee, Virginia, all while rapidly expanding. At WynnBET, the possibilities are limitless. WynnBET is currently offering all Rotowire listeners a risk-free bet up to $500 on your first wager. Download WynnBET now. That's WYNNBET. WynnBET, the exclusive partner for Rotowire's Fantasy Podcasts. So Ryan, let's talk about running backs. I think it's an interesting triumvirate at the top. There's a bunch of guys. There's 5 guys above 7,700 on DraftKings, but there's 3 that I think people are going to gravitate towards. Jonathan Taylor's 8,100, Dalvin Cook is 8,000. By all accounts, he's playing this week, so we're going to kind of treat this podcast that he's playing full go. And Najee Harris at 7,900. Harris has the Lions. Cook has the Chargers. You mentioned earlier, terrible against the run. Jonathan Taylor has Jacksonville. Like three fantastic matchups. Three matchups where Harris and Taylor are favored. Cook's in a game that could go back and forth. It's hard to play two of these guys, but if you're picking between this group, I think this three would be popular. What are you doing?
Oh man, that's a tough decision. Yeah, so
it is. It's a great group this week.
It really is. So running back is really tough this week, and it's really different. I just want to mention, I think most people who listen to this podcast probably know who Adam Levitan is. He tweeted last night that there are 11 running backs that are viable for cash, and that is more than he could ever remember. And
that's a lot for a cat. If you don't know, Adam does a really popular cash article every week that he does really well in cash games, and 11's a lot.
Yeah, he's been one of the best cash players for multiple years now, and 11 running backs. And I counted. You can count 11 also. I'm sure we'll get into them, but so yeah, there's not a lock, so or not like it doesn't seem like there's going to be anybody that's going to be overly popular except a cheap guy who we'll get to, and that might not even happen. But anyways, at the top. I think I would side with Jonathan Taylor. It's such a good matchup, and I like the way they're using him now in the passing game too. And he's scoring touchdowns every week, and you figure he's going to have a lot of chances for touchdowns at home against Jacksonville. Yep. I mean, Dalvin Cook, he's in a great matchup against the Chargers, who have just been getting crushed by they just can't stop the run.
Yep.
And, that game has a high total, and, Dalvin still catches passes too. I guess I prefer Taylor and Dalvin. I like Harris too, but I guess I prefer the other guys because I like their offenses better. Pittsburgh's offensive line is really bad.
Yeah.
Harris is still a good play. Like, I'm just trying to, maybe separate them a little. I think if Chase Claypool's out for Pittsburgh, it might mean a few more targets for Harris, who hasn't been catching quite as many passes as he was at the start of the season. If I had to pick one, though, I think I side with Taylor. What about you, Scott?
It's tough. Like, I like all three guys too. And the weird thing with Harris is, like, you look at it, you're like, 20 plus touches in 6 straight games. Like, they feed the crap out of him. Mike Tomlin, if they had the lead, is going to hand it off to him over and over again. He scored the last 3 weeks. Detroit's 30th in the NFL in points per game to running backs in fantasy, but you're right. They aren't running it well. Like, they're running it a lot, but they're not running. He was 22 of 62, 26 91, 24 81. Like, not horrible, but yards per carry is not great. The explosiveness got great. He's got to score to work, but he has been scoring. It's just weird because it's a plus matchup. It's a great game script, but you just worry a little bit about how this offense kind of functions, like you said. And with Taylor, Taylor looks awesome, but Jacksonville's allowing 3.5 yards per carry. If they do anything well, it's stopping the run. But he has 9 touchdowns the last 6 weeks. He was 172 and 2 touchdowns. He's coming off a 10-game off days now because they played the Thursday night game against the Jets. Like, they all line up well, but like, I wish we didn't have the weird off the field stuff with Dalvin because it's just a supreme matchup. I mean, you mentioned the Chargers, 4.9 yards per carry, worse than the NFL. They're 31st in points per game allowed rushing per week. So I like all three. I think I kind of side with the best player with you. I go with JT also. He's rolling right now. I think that I like their offense. I like the fact that should be leading in this game. Jacksonville's not very good. I think I go JT too, but like, I haven't fully decided. I could see all three of them working out pretty well. And there's a couple of guys in that range we're talking about later as kind of tournament plays that I think are usable also. So it's a fun week at running back. Last week was really bad at running back. If I remember right, we kind of had trouble finding guys we like. So it's interesting that how much it shift. But in terms of the cash lineup, one guy in the middle I want to highlight is James Conner at 6,300. Chase Edmonds got hurt in the first play last week against the Niners. So that's one of those things, like, can't predict that, but boy, did it work out well. He had a huge game, 96 yards rushing, 2 rush touchdowns, 77 yards receiving, 5 catches, a touchdown through the air. Also, are you going back to Conner this week? He's 6,300 this week. They're playing home against Carolina. They're favored by about 10.5 points. Carolina's been allowing a bunch of rush yards. He actually leads the NFL with 11 touchdowns, believe it or not, James Conner, which I don't think we saw coming 2 months ago. Are you going back to Conner in the mid-range here at 6,300?
Yeah. Sure. First, I just want to say you did sway me a little in your talk about the expensive running backs. I think it's a good point that Taylor's going up against a better run defense than the other two. Yeah, that's a very good point. And the other guys, well, Harris especially, will probably get more touches than Taylor. I see.
I mean,
Taylor.
the Najee touches are like locked in, right? Like that's just it's 20 plus, and you just know it's going to happen. It's just a matter of how good they are.
Yes, and Taylor, I'm looking right now, hasn't had 20 carries all year. With the catches, he's averaging about 20 touches. So yeah, you make some good points, and it's definitely not clear cut. Back to Connor, yeah. For me to go back to Connor, it means I would have had to been on him in the first place, which I haven't been.
No Edmonds though changes things.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I'm on Connor this week to answer your question.
Okay.
Yeah, no Edmonds. No Edmonds changes a lot because normally I didn't like rostering him because hasn't really been involved in the passing game, but. Right. 5 catches with Edmonds out, and I was watching. He looked explosive at times in that game. I saw. I mean,
how was the 49ers tackling looking to you in that game? Was it looking sharp as always?
Yeah, no, it wasn't looking sharp as always.
Good Lord, it's terrible.
But he was out there, breaking tackles or maybe making one-handed catches. And like you said, most touchdowns in the league. Yeah, I think I'm. As things stand, I'll be rostering Connor in cash. Yeah, it's just, it's a great spot. I don't know. Without Chase Edmonds, he's just the lead guy, and he's only 6,300. He should be more expensive than that for this spot. So it just makes sense. You agree?
I do. The other thing I like is that, I mean, at least from his aspect, is that they're not really putting Kyler in spots where he's running a ton. I mean, he's the threat is still there, which is kind of all you need to open up those gaps, but he's not. I mean, look at Kyler doesn't have more than 25 yards rushing the last 5 games. I guess he didn't play last week. His last 4 games. And the most important thing is he's not doing it at the goal line, which is what you care about when you have Connor. Like Kyler had 3 rushing touchdowns the first 3 weeks, doesn't have 1 since. So like those plays inside the 4, like they're just giving it to Connor rather than having Kyler run it in. So it's just, I mean, I think that matters. And I think at some point, if they wanted their offense to be fully explosive, they're going to have to run Kyler a little bit more, but they're clearly protecting him right now. He had a little bit of an arm issue. Maybe that had something to do with it. They didn't want him to get hit, but the fact that they're just handing it off inside the 5 is a really good sign for Connor too.
Absolutely.
The one cheap guy you mentioned that people are going to have a lot if it happens is I assume it's D'Ernest Johnson for the Browns. Nick Chubb is on the COVID protocol list right now. So is Dominic Felton. Like if you're, touches going away, I mean, that matters a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit. He's 4,700 at New England. The 1 week that D'Ernest started, he had 22 carries, 146 yards and a touchdown. I think the thing we know is that Cleveland wants to and can run the football no matter who's back there. They have a good offensive line. They're committed to the run. In a game like this, they're going to want to run for sure against New England's defense. Not a great game script. It's not like a high-scoring, explosive game, but the Browns like to stick with the run. They're going to hand it off no matter what the score is, unless they really get down. But, Mac Jones is not going to – you don't see them, explosively coming out for 27 points in the first half or anything. So you got to think if Chubb doesn't play, Johnson touches the ball a lot. And at 4,700, I'm not sure you need more than a lot of touches.
Yep, you said it. The matchup's not great, at New England, but it doesn't matter for 4,700. If Chubb's going to be out and Felton's going to be out, like he's the only back. They're already short on wide receivers with, no Beckham, Landry banged up. They love to run the ball. Yeah, it's just one of those 4,700. You don't think about it much. And if Chubb and those guys are out, he'll be so popular in cash that it doesn't matter really if he has a bad game. It's not going to hurt you. You almost just have to roster him to block everyone else in case he does have a good game. So yeah, for 4,700, just pretty much don't think about it and play him in cash if he's going to start and those other guys are out. But
is he cheap enough and involved enough that you just kind of toss him in a tournament too with that slot, or is that someone you pivot away from and want to get away from if you're playing like in a big field tournament?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think you can do either. I think
I do too. I don't think it's like automatic. Like, oh, he's popular. You don't have to play him. Like if he does well in a tournament, you're going to want him, and it just unlocks a lot of stuff. The rest of your lineup you can get different there too.
Right. He's so cheap. And, like you said, he just doesn't need to do that much, for a tournament. But there, you could still fade too, just because there's other good options. Like if you play Connor and somebody else at running back, we might have a few cheap wide receivers depending on what happens with injuries. So you don't have to, but yeah, like I would still play him in some of my GPP lineups for sure. Yeah. Sorry, I just wanted to.
Oh, go ahead.
Just wanted to piggyback a little bit more on Connor because you made some great points about Kyler being injured. Or not even, he's banged up but not running the ball. And, Hopkins banged up, AJ Green questionable, Rondale Moore questionable. And then Carolina starting PJ Walker, which also helps Connor. I mean, so he's just got everything going for him. So, I just wanted to sort of put a stamp on that. I agree. Connor looks great this week.
Yeah, he does, and they're committed to him. But let's jump into receivers. I think it's another week where I really like a lot of guys this week. It's actually a fun week as opposed to last week. Like we kind of felt it was going to be gross, and it was obviously way grosser than we thought. But in terms of the top at red receiver, we're going to talk about a bunch of guys. But I think that Devontae Adams, those popular, he's under 8,000 this week, which I think people just like to see Devontae under 8,000 and go there. Obviously, he still had 14 targets last week with Jordan Love. Granted, they weren't good targets. They weren't effective targets. He was 6 or 42, but they forced the crap out of the ball to him. Aaron Rodgers loves to throw the ball to him. Obviously, there's not a lot to say about Devontae except the fact that he's under 8,000. So I think he's probably gonna be the most popular of the top guys, just because people will gravitate towards that kind of auto click on Devontae.
Yeah, I agree. And it is sort of an auto click when he's under 8K, and we don't have Cooper Kupp on the slate, so he's clearly the top receiving option and probably shouldn't be priced that closely to the guys below him. He definitely shouldn't be priced that closely to most of them. And with Rodgers coming back, it seems like a good spot. Rodgers is, based on everything that's happened, I don't know. I think he's going to want to come out and play well and at least try to make a statement and try to look for Devontae. And this is a bounce back spot, I think, for him in Green Bay. And it's a good matchup and a great price. Yeah. Devontae is probably a priority in cash. Yeah.
Yeah, I think he'll be pretty popular. It's funny you mentioned Cooper Kupp, but you look at the top 6 receivers in the NFL based on yards. Devontae's the only one that's on the slate of the top 6.
Wow. Yeah. Okay.
Cooper Kupp, Debo, both play Monday night. Jamar Chase is on bye. Tyreek is on Sunday night, and Marquise Brown played last night.
Yeah, he really stands out.
Wow. I looked at it. I think he stood out, but I didn't actually look up to see how much he stood out. Boy, does he really stick out. That's pretty wild when you look at the receiving yards. But yeah, I think he sticks out there. We're going to talk about some of the other guys in the range when we do some stacks and kind of, expensive guys who might be lower owned. But I want to talk one more receiver here before we jump to some tournament talk. If Chris Godwin doesn't play and Gronkowski doesn't play, how popular then does Tyler Johnson get at 3,300? I know the receivers in the 3,000s are very hit or miss, but this dude had 6 targets in their last game in week 8. Tyler Johnson, a fun guy. He made a really big catch in the playoffs last year on I think it was either a 3rd or a 4th down. Brady trusts him a little bit, but if Brown sits, Godwin sits, and Gronkowski sits, is everybody going to throw Tyler Johnson there at 3,300?
Yeah. I think I would, to be honest, and I'm trying to be extra careful with these cheap wide receivers in cash these days. That's like the number one way to lose cash is to play these cheap wide receivers.
Brian Edwards has no idea what you're talking about.
Oh man. Yeah. The list goes on. Russell Gage, that 3-name guy for the Titans that everyone played that one week.
I'm just going with the Nick Westbrook because I can't say the last name.
Yeah. But anyways, like you said, Godwin, Brown, and Gronk out. That makes Tyler Johnson the second option for Tom Brady, and he's 33.
It's not like Brady's going to stop throwing the ball because a couple of guys are out. They're going to still throw it around. And he played 49 snaps in week 7. He had 6 targets in week 8. It's not like he's just someone coming off the bench that hasn't been in there. I think they like him.
Yeah, and it would let you pay up in another spot. And there's a lot of guys to pay up for at running back and receiver and quarterback if you want to. Yeah. So I think he would be safer than most of the than most of the cheap wide receiver options that we get. Yeah, I would go there. What do you think?
If Godwin and Brown don't play, I'm definitely going there. I just think you get a good offense with the best quarterback of all time. Like at 3,300, I think that's pretty much an auto click for me if those two guys don't play. I think I'm going to have him and just figure that at 3,300, even if he busts a little bit, like it's okay. But if he does well, like that's it's a huge spot, gets you so much else. I mean, we're talking about Dernis Johnson being so easy at 4,700. Like it's another 1,400 down to Johnson. Granted, it won't be the touches that a running back like that gets, but I just think that if those two guys are out, give me that offense, give me Brady. I think I go Tyler Johnson kind of all day, and I think most people will. I don't think I'm breaking ground here, but at 3,300, give me all that if those two guys don't play.
Yeah, and the one thing I'll add is that I would also play Mike Evans. Some people might not want to have two from the same team, but Evans might, if Godwin, Brown, and Gronk are all out, Mike Evans might be the top receiving play on the slate.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't have a problem playing both of them.
And I mean, we're obviously doing this on Friday morning, so we don't know about Godwin. He might practice today. I mean, he's very much a game time decision. So that's one of those ones and they play early, so that helps a little bit. You can kind of set your whole lineup, you'll know it in an hour and a half before the game if Godwin's playing. So you can kind of set your whole lineup, knowing that you don't have to wait for the late shift or anything like that. So it's a lot depends on who plays, but I think that Tyler Johnson is very popular and a really good play if those guys don't play. At tight end, usually we'll save tight end for the end, but I think that Kyle Pitts is going to be really popular this week, under 6,000, 5,800. He's got 20% of the Atlanta targets for 5 straight weeks. But it was a little quiet the last couple of weeks compared to those big blow-up games, but 40 targets the last 5 weeks. And I think more than anything, we're going to get a situation where this is the highest total game. And I think of the Atlanta pass catchers, this is the one everybody's going to go to. We'll probably see some Cordell Patterson. We'll talk about him in a second. But I think of the receivers and tight ends for Atlanta, I think everybody's just going to be like, I want one in this game. I'm just going to go Pitts at 5,800 and call it a day.
Yeah. I like Pitts. I think more so for tournaments. Unless we get a Tyler Johnson and Dearness Johnson.
Yeah.
I don't know if spending up for tight end is the right move this week, just because we have guys at other positions to spend for, and there's some cheap guys. There's some cheap tight ends that look decent, and the cheap tight ends have been doing well just about every week.
Yeah, they have.
So yeah, I do like Pitts more so for tournaments than cash as things stand.
So let's jump into some receiver quarterback stacks. But first, a note from our sponsors at Yahoo DFS. The NFL season is heating up, and Yahoo is going big on daily fantasy football this season. There'll be a ton of big prize contests throughout the year on Yahoo, including their multi-entry contest now being shark-free. To celebrate Yahoo going big on DFS as well as Yahoo Daily Fantasy becoming shark-free, Yahoo is giving all users the opportunity to claim a free $10 in site credit. Users can take advantage of this free $10 site credit to join any paid contest, including Yahoo's biggest contest, the weekly $1 million DFS NFL Baller Contest. The weekly $1 million contest features $1 million in total prizes, including first place receiving $100,000 and a ton of overlaid prizes. Play daily fantasy football on Yahoo this season. Visit sports.yahoo.com/dailyfantasy/welcome to claim the free $10 offer to get started. So tournament stacks, I think we kind of referenced it up top. I think my first one to go to, and I want to know how you feel about which receiver, but is Dallas. I love Dak with Lamb this week. Dak is under 7,000. Lamb is 7,000 exactly. Amari Cooper, 6,200. Lamb was 2 for 23 last week, but had 9 targets, and that game was maddening if you had CeeDee Lamb. They missed him a couple times, including late on like an open touchdown, like an easy passes. Dak was just he was off the injury. He had missed the prayer game. He was just a little bit off. Michael Gallup is back, so maybe the passing tree gets extended a little bit, which I don't love. But Lamb has 28 targets the last 3 weeks. He's 7,000. He's explosive. I'm taking Lamb over Cooper this week. A lot of Dak Lamb for me this week in stacks.
Yeah, I'm with you. I prefer Lamb also. Dak Lamb stacks look great. You mentioned Gallup. I think you can throw him in there too if you want. I mean, if you roster Dak, you want him to throw 4 or 5 touchdowns. Gallup can catch a long one also. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense to run it back with Pitts or
Gallup's 4,000 too. I thought he was a little bit higher than that. He's 4,000.
Yeah, 4,000. Right. That's he only needs to catch a few passes and a touchdown to make 4,000 pay off. So yeah, that stack looks really good. Of course, you can play Amari Cooper as well if you don't want to. I probably wouldn't play him and Lamb. It's one or the other. I agree. I would go with Lamb.
Yeah,
I know
Amari's weird. Like he's had some blow up games, but then he has like 3 or fewer catches 5 times this year. Like it's a weird, like he very much is kind of in that like Terry McLaurinville. Like he either goes off or kind of is really quiet. I don't know. I can't figure out. I'm having trouble timing Cooper, and it's because he's having a couple of those really bad games.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking right now. He's had 2 games over 15 fantasy points. I mean, sorry, one is 15.9, but still 2 games over 16 fantasy points all season. That's not very encouraging. I agree with you that Lamb is more explosive, probably more likely to hit big plays. So yeah, I'm on CeeDee Lamb over Cooper as well.
What other stacks you going over? You mentioned you do like
Yeah.
a lot of stacks. I'm going to talk about one in a second here, but kind of who are you looking at for really kind of targeting to stack games here?
Okay, so yeah, I know we've sort of talked about this game in this situation, but if Godwin is out, I'm playing Brady, Evans, Tyler Johnson. I mean it's just such an easy stack. I mean Brady, what else can we say about him? He's going for MVP this year. He's trying to throw as many touchdowns as possible. You can play a cheap tight end in that game as well. You can play Ricky Seals-Jones, who's like going a little bit overlooked, but still a good play at that price. And you can also play Cameron Brate or OJ Howard if Gronk's out. They're both 2,700 and both have plenty of touchdown upside. You can also run it back with Terry McLaurin if you wanted to. This Tampa Bay pass defense is a great target because their run defense is so good and their pass defense just hasn't been good. So it makes a lot of sense. It's like an easy stack if Godwin is out. But moving on from that game, we mentioned that the Chargers, Vikings game is a good target, and it is. I'm with you. I love playing Herbert. You can pair him with with Allen, or I think Mike Williams is more in play this week because he's finally cheaper than Keenan Allen now. And Jared Cook's a cheap tight end that's in play as well. Some other stacks, or maybe like I like smaller stacks from the Green Bay Seattle game, like running back Devontae Adams with either DK Metcalf or Tyler Lockett. Now that Russ is back. And like okay, moving on from that game, the Indianapolis Jacksonville game, I think you can get a cheap stack from that game. Like
I like that one too.
Pair him with Pittman and run it back with Arnold. So you have a cheap quarterback in Wentz, a cheap tight end in Arnold, who just keeps getting tons of targets, keeps doing well. It's one of Lawrence's favorite targets. So yeah, I think that one makes a lot of sense. And then the other one I'm considering, he's let me down in recent weeks, is Josh Allen. Are
we going with at some point Stephon Diggs is gonna have a big game again?
Yeah, so
it's wild. Like he has one game over 100 yards all year, and this is a guy that like last year, like every single week was huge. It's just they just haven't quite been clicking on that connection.
Yeah, so it's one of those, I think we said last time, it's not mandatory to play Diggs. If you want to play Devontae Adams at that price instead of Diggs, that's fine too. You will be able to get Diggs less popular, and he's getting less popular, it seems like, by the week, just as he's not smashing anymore. But the reason I think that stack is okay is because people will be on all these other games, and then the Jets do have some guys you can run it back with. Sorry, I'm just looking. I see Corey Davis is questionable now. It seems like he might play, but yeah, I don't know. Like Crowder and Elijah Moore are okay run back options, and so is Michael Carter as a cheap running back. I don't know if I'll get there, but it's an option at least. So what were you thinking? You said you had one in mind that you really liked.
You talked about it. For me, it's the Chargers. I really like Herbert with either Allen or Williams. I kind of lean a little bit at Williams this week just because he's cheaper. And I think, he only has 5 targets each the last 3 weeks, but I think that he had a big one last week. It was not a touchdown, but like a 40-yard play. He was 258 last week. But it's weird. I think that they've realized that they were throwing the ball to Williams a lot. I think their offense works a little better when Keenan's the underneath guy and then Williams is the deep guy. But I think you get a big play of that. But I really like the theory of running it back with Justin Jefferson. I don't think he's going to be very popular this week just because Devontae's like very close in price. What's Jefferson? Jefferson is 7,700. So like, I mean, Adams is right there. And if people aren't stacking that game, I think you look at that, you're like, I'll just play Devontae Adams instead. So I think you get Jefferson. I like the fact the offensive coordinator came out this week and said we need to throw him the ball more. He only has 9 targets last couple weeks. He had a 50-yard touchdown last week, but then after that, he had like 4 targets, 2 catches, 19 yards. So I think, I always like squeaky wheel receivers. Not that he was squeaky wheel, but like the fact they realized they need to throw him the ball a little more. So I really like getting that with the fact I think you'll get a really good receiver in Jefferson. Lower roster than most. So, and I always love a Herbert stack. I know it let us down a couple times, but I mean, last week was huge. His other quarterbacks were busting. It was him and Lamar that pretty much were the guys that were really playing well. Herbert last week is 32 of 38 for 356. Like not only fantasy wise, but that's just an unbelievable, like real football game. Like 32 of 38 is really impressive. So, I like the possibility of that being a back and forth game too. I think that you could go, if you want to get a little spicy in the tournament, I think you kind of flip that. Maybe you go with Cousins and Jefferson and come back with one of the receivers, or come back with Austin Eckler. I think that works really well too. If you want to be different, I don't think anybody's going to have Cousins. So I think that works out well too. In a game that's pretty high scoring, to get a quarterback that not many people are going to have is always a pretty good thing in a tournament.
Yeah, I really like the Jefferson call. Anytime you can get a guy like I like the squeaky wheel. I like everything you mentioned. Anytime you can get a guy like Jefferson, who's not going to be popular, he's going to be among the least popular in this range. And he has the upside to be the highest scoring receiver on the slate. So much leverage for tournaments. Yeah, I really like that call. And you can run it back with Thielen as well. I really like that Herbert Chargers stack.
If I don't play 150 lineups in anything, but if I were, I would have a few PJ Walker, DJ Moore stacks just to cover that. I think that's the off the boardest, under 3% owned. I think that if I played a ton of lineups, I think I'd have a couple in there because I actually like PJ Walker more than most do. I think he had one start last year. He's 24, 34, 258. It did not look good this year so far, but I think he'd throw it a little bit. I think they're going to pepper DJ Moore. So if I were going big time, a lot of lineups, I'd have a couple in there.
Yeah, I'm so happy you said that, to be honest, because I'm on the same page. If you were going to ask me to bring up someone off the board or someone for 150 or those bigger tournaments, yeah, I mean, 5K for PJ Walker. Yeah, I mean he, some people might know him from he tore up the XFL.
Yeah.
He's 5K and he can run a little and no one's going to play him. And he doesn't need to do that much, to be honest. Like I'm considering it myself and I don't even 150 max. I'm considering having a few PJ Walker. I don't need to do much for 5K.
Yeah. We talked about this running backs at the top. You could play 2 of those guys in that kind of lineup and really be different and really, really have a huge score too. Like
absolutely.
PJ Walker is just okay. Like you could really build a lineup that works well.
Right. Like if PJ Walker, say he scores 18 and none of the quarterbacks on the slate score 30, which is, or they all score, 25, 27. Yeah. I mean, that's a win if you have PJ Walker and you're only losing 10 points to the field at most at quarterback. Pairing him with DJ Moore, that's fine too. I think you could play him naked too for 5K because he has a little bit of rushing ability. And it doesn't even matter. You can play any quarterback naked when they're 5K. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, I do like that. I probably won't get there with the amount of lineups I play, but I think in a tournament build, I might throw one in there now that we talked about it. A couple of those, smaller dollar tournaments. I might throw a lineup in there with Cook and Taylor or something like that, and get. Those guys will be popular, but having them together won't be nearly as popular, obviously. That's a good segue. I want to talk about some of the more expensive guys real quick that we have not talked about, just because of the fact they kind of might get lost with the other expensive guys. We talked about those 3 running backs at the top with Taylor, Najee, and Dalvin. Christian McCaffrey, we're 48 minutes into this podcast, haven't mentioned the guy who's the number 1 pick in every single fantasy draft across the entire world earlier this year. He's 8,400. He only played 29 snaps last week, but in typical Carolina fashion, he had 18 touches in those snaps, had over 100 yards. So, it wasn't great, but, he still had 100 yards in the game. He played 30 snaps in, which is pretty wild. A good game script conceivably for how Carolina used to play. If they're behind, they used to dump it down to him. I don't know if the problem with this is I don't know if they'll play him in the fourth quarter if they're down. It's one of those things that used to play him and he'd get 6 catches in the fourth quarter. Now it's do we really want to risk this? Is it worth it? How fully healthy is he? And then Austin Eckler's in here at 7,600 also. Minnesota's bad against the run. We talk about the Chargers being bad against the run, but so is Minnesota, 4.6 yards per carry. Eckler had 3 targets last week. As Herbert really got rolling, he didn't really dump it down very much to Eckler, but he's obviously always very involved. Have to think he's low roster with the other 3 right above him. Do you like either of those 2 guys as kind of a way to get different in a tournament, but still have a stud player in there?
I mean, yeah, I do. It's
hard. It's hard to
tough.
get there with those other guys, though. It's tough.
Yeah, and so yeah, it's hard to. Yeah, I guess. Okay, I like McCaffrey because everyone's gonna play Taylor and Cook and Harris and those other guys, and I can still see. I can see McCaffrey outscoring all of them. Like it's weird to have an $8,400 McCaffrey like not be popular and almost not be chalky. But yeah, 29 snaps last week, 18 touches though. So like when he's in there, he's getting the ball. I'm not sure how I feel about him with PJ Walker. Like I don't know if that changes anything. Does it affect how he's going to catch the ball? I guess we don't know. But yeah, I'm going to try to get to some McCaffrey. Like a low rostered McCaffrey just seems appealing to me, and he doesn't even have a questionable tag. I mean, he might get something close to a full load if the game stays close, and I don't know. People might not be expecting that. Eckler, yeah, I don't know. I don't really have anything to add. He's a good play, and he's going to go overlooked, and he can easily be the top scoring running back on the slate. So yeah, I think all those guys are good plays. It's like we mentioned at the start, running back is so tough. I almost think like if you're listening, it's a personal preference thing this week. Honestly, just go with who you like. All of these guys that you can make arguments for all of them. They all could be the top scorer. I mean, seriously, it's sort of a play whoever you want slate at running back. I don't know. I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, as I get into it on Saturday night or Sunday morning, I'll probably find an edge with one guy and be like, I'm just going to go with JT or Dalvin, but I can't argue against the other guys either. Like you can make a case for all of them. The McCaffrey thing is interesting. Like that's one of those things. Like on Sunday night, you'd be like, well, why didn't everybody just play McCaffrey at 8,400? Like it's just so obvious, but. There's so many good choices. We have a little bit of worry about snap count. We talked about, PJ Walker might be interesting in a tournament setup, but like he might score 5 points too. Like there's a lot of risk for a PJ Walker offense. He's not looked good this year, but in his limited time as backup. But it's I just think there's so many options up top, and they're all pretty usable. I think Eckler is going to be very overlooked just because the fact the 4 guys above him, everybody's going to like those guys. So. Same thing at receiver though. Like we talked about Devontae. It's like under 8,000. You just go to him, but like AJ Brown 7,800. I can't imagine many people are going to click that. I mean, I love AJ Brown, but 7,800 coming off a quiet week last week. It still had 11 targets. I just think this is a nice setup though. They have no Derrick Henry, and they're playing against the Saints, who you don't want to run against anyway. So like you wonder if they're just going to be like, well, screw the run. Mick Nichols and Adrian Peterson, like we would want to force them down. So if Henry was there, sure, they'd hand it off 25 times. It's all they always do. But like you wonder against this defense and this setup without Henry, if they just be like, let's just use AJ Brown, use Julio, who now is on the questionable list again too, but use our receivers and maybe kind of score some points passing the ball. So I think AJ Brown, I mean, I don't think anybody's going to click him at 7,800 either. No,
and I agree with you. I always like AJ Brown in these spots, just without Henry and Julio. I don't know. He's sort of always questionable, and it doesn't really factor into my decision. The one thing I don't like targeting Saints games. I mean, they're one of the slowest teams always, and that's what they try to do. Now, that's not like the end of the world if you just need AJ Brown to go off. You don't need the whole game to go off. So I do still like it. Like he has a big ceiling. But yeah, I'm usually off Saints games, I guess.
That makes sense.
I like it because, like we mentioned, Devontae is going to be the popular one in that range, and you can get, AJ Brown like lower rostered, which is nice. I probably won't get there, but I agree with like everything you said.
Yeah, if I was going to play a one-off there, I think I would just go to Justin Jefferson, 100 less. I mean, I think that I like him a little more. I like that game more. So I like AJ Brown, love him as a player, but I think I probably it's hard for me to click it when I got Jefferson. But maybe that's why he works. But and it's funny you talk about the Saints. We didn't even mention Alvin Kamara at 8,200 at running back, but he's questionable. I don't know if he's going to play. So we just kind of, with all the running back options, I'm probably just avoiding that one. But
yeah,
you have Diggs there at 7,500 too. Like there's a lot of receivers, plays a lot of running. It's a fun week where you can really, like you said, play who you want because there's going to be so many options.
It is. And a couple other guys that, like I like McLaurin in that range. I think it's a good spot for McLaurin. It makes sense to run him back with Buccaneers. We didn't mention, but Heineke is in play also as a cheap quarterback. And, if PJ Walker's in play, Heineke is for 400 more in a game where they're not going to be able to run, going to have to pass. Heineke has some rushing upside. One more guy, just going back to running back real quick that I wanted to touch on, who I think is a very good tournament play, and that's Aaron Jones. Devontae is going to be popular. Ezekiel Elliott for the same price at running back is going to be more popular than Jones. And then those top running backs are going to be popular too. But with Rodgers back, I really like Jones. I think he has a lot of receiving upside in the matchup and a lot of touchdown equity as well. And I think he'll go overlooked. So I think that's a good GPP play too.
And I think really everybody's over him too, which is always a good sign. I mean, he had 12 carries last week. That was with Jordan Love, but I think that people are concerned with the AJ Dillon's kind of biting into his usage a little bit. But I mean, you get Aaron Jones at no percent rostered, like that's going to be in a tournament. That's always a good place to be in a game that you could end up going back and forth.
Yeah, and you mentioned AJ Dillon. This is maybe a deeper play too, but especially if there's no Dearness Johnson, or if Chubb ends up playing and we don't really have the Dearness Johnson option, I don't mind taking a shot on Dillon if you're playing a lot of lineups, and I especially don't mind taking a shot on Dillon in the afternoon slate where there's only 4 games to pick from for 4,800. He would help you do a lot, and he's not going to be very popular. But I like what I've seen from him. They're really trying to get him involved. I think Packers running backs are like good leverage in tournaments.
So someone in the chat asked, have you won any big tournaments?
Okay. Yeah. Well, I forget what week it was. Week 1 of 2, 3. What? I got second, or I got I got 6th for 5,000 in the $333 tournament. However, I was in second, which would have been 30,000, and I dropped down to 6th on the very last play of the entire slate, which was every game was over except it was the Steelers Packers, the last game going. Najee Harris caught a dump off, and it dropped me from 2nd to 6th, 30,000 down to 5,000. So to answer your question, no, I have not won a big NFL tournament this year, but we've had some shots.
Yeah.
Scott won a huge tournament a couple years ago.
I don't like to talk about myself, but if you go, I wrote an article about it in 2016. I won a lot of money a few years back, and on a really fun Sunday. I came in second it was the FanDuel Sunday Million out of 75,000, and enough to pay for my DFS for the rest of my life, which the levels I play, which is really nice. So one maybe not, but won plenty of money that it worked out really well. So Mike, I appreciate you bringing it up so I could talk about myself, which is
that's awesome.
Always a good thing. Yeah,
that's awesome.
It was a lot of fun. It was a little bit surreal. It's funny if you ever go back and look. There's a play in Sunday night was on the main slate. Then they changed that a couple years ago. Lamar Miller had a late touchdown that took me from 5,000 to a lot more, and it's the most absurd touchdown ever. It's like 3rd and 7 from the 10. And he catches a pass of the 5 and actually runs sideways and backwards back to the 10, and then kind of stops, and everybody in the defense runs with him, and he just kind of went the other way. It's he was dead. The play was dead. There was no way he was scoring, and like 6 guys bit on the fake. Like if you look at it, there's like 7 guys right in front of him, and he went the other way. It's like the most absurd touchdown. It's Lamar Miller too. It's not like it's Barry Sanders. Like it's just I watched it. Every once in a while, if I'm in a bad mood, I'll go back and watch that touchdown because it's so absurd, and it took me over the top. So it was fun. But
that's awesome.
Thanks, Mike. I don't know if the question was real or being a smart ass, but I appreciate it because I got to talk about myself. So that's always good. But let's talk about some mid-range running backs. But first, a note from our sponsors at Thrive. Thrive is back for another season of fantasy football. They're running huge guaranteed contests each week this NFL season. With Thrive Fantasy, you can eliminate the countless hours of research and focus on only the top-tier athletes that made the biggest impact on the game. Sign up today and get a free 6-month Rotowire subscription. Here's how you claim that subscription. Visit rotowire.com/thrive Deposit a minimum of $10 and receive a 100% deposit bonus up to $100. And play in your first paid contest, receive a free 6-month Rotowire subscription. That's all through Thrive. The funny thing is, and to go back to the tournament question, though, I actually won an NHL GPP like 3 years ago too. I haven't watched an NHL game since the mid '90s, but I have a friend, Russ Prentice, who is a big hockey DFS player. We were talking about. He's like, "Hey, throw a couple of these guys in." I kind of put the lineup with his help. Pretty much him telling me who to play, and I ended up winning a tournament. Like to the point that I had a softball game that night. I came back and I looked at it was FanDuel. I looked at FanDuel. I'm like, "What the heck happened to my account? Like, did they have some kind of big bonus?" And I realized that I won a $25 hockey tournament for like $4,000 or something like that. So it was fun. So Mike, I appreciate you letting me talk more about myself. Mid-range running back this week. We have Zeke at 7,000. We have Cordero at 6,600. Fournette's in there. DeAndre Swift is in there. We talked a lot about the higher end range, how much we like a lot of those guys. As you drop down here, we talked about James Conner in this range already, but who else do you like besides Conner in kind of this, I don't know, 5,500 to 6,000 range, or 5,500 to 7,000 range?
Yeah. Well, I like Cordero Patterson. Good matchup, and it should be a good game script because just the amount of passes he's been catching. He's with Ridley out too. He's more involved in the receiving game.
Yeah.
It's just he's been unbelievable this season. So much touchdown upside too. Fournette though, I think you can go to Fournette no matter what. But if, like we said, if Godwin is out, I mean, yeah, Fournette becomes a great play. If they're down to just Fournette and Mike Evans as the main two weapons, yeah, definitely have interest in Fournette. I think he's okay, even if Godwin does play. But yeah, I'd really have some interest if those receivers were out. Then cheaper, it's tough. I think you can make an argument, this is just a tournament play. And again, it's because I've been focused on sort of that Tampa Bay game, but I wouldn't mind running it back with McKissick. He's now put up over 17 in 4 out of the last 7. And he's catching so many balls, and they're going to be losing, and nobody rosters him. So that's kind of like a deeper play. But in the range you mentioned, yeah, I think Cordero Patterson and Fournette would be my top 2. I guess you could, take a chance on Michael Carter. He catches a lot of passes with Mike White. What do you think, Scott?
I like Patterson too. It's funny. As last week, as I got more and more into him, as I looked, he was 6,300, 6,600 this week, but like 6 for 126 receiving is just so insane. Like it's wild. I mean, I get the New Orleans rush. You didn't expect him to do a lot this week. He was 9 for 10, but like it's a wild receiving game. And Dallas is allowing 4.5 yards per carry, so he does get some. Does get 9 or 10 rushes again. Could be a really good number there. And it's weird. You get a running back where the touches are kind of always there, but also has big play pass threats in there too. You don't still get that from running back. So I think that under 7,000, I think Patterson's playable again if you wanted to kind of move away from Connor. I always have trouble with Fournette. I get it. Washington's pretty good against the run, so I don't know if I'm going to fully get there. And I think that usually when Tampa plays teams that are good against the run, they just pass and beat them that way. But if they're up in the game, they're going to have to do something. If Fournette will have a lot of touches, I think you can kind of throw out the New Orleans game as we do with most running backs. But where do you think Zeke falls in terms of like popularity this week? He let everybody down last week, got hurt mid-game. He had 73 yards on 13 touches. Like his efficiency was pretty good, but just, didn't get the touches and they were way down. It was a game that we thought was going to be a great game script, completely flipped the opposite direction. Do you think people will be scared of that and just kind of move to other guys? Where do you think Zeke kind of falls in terms of the popularity aspect this week?
Yeah, I think because there's so many running backs in play that none of them are necessarily going to be too popular. I like going back to Zeke. I think other people will like going back to Zeke too. And some people will be scared off because of what happened, maybe also because of his questionable tag. But yeah, I like going back to Zeke. I plan to go back to Zeke, especially because, people are going to like Dak in the passing game there too. So, why not the running game? I think Zeke has a lot of upside in that matchup. Yeah, I like going back. What do you think?
I do. I always like to go back to really good players after bad weeks. I think that I don't know if I'm going to get there, but I think it's a perfectly fine play, and I always like going back for guys after week after they struggle. I want to make sure that his injury's all right. It seems like he is. It seems like he's practicing and playing. So I think that's good.
Sorry, Scott. You mentioned when we were talking about injuries at the start. I wanted to say I definitely agree with you. When we have running backs and receivers that have lower body injuries, it does give me cause for concern. So that was a good point to bring up.
So last thing on running back, we've gone a little bit long, but I just want to ask you. So if you are in a tournament, everybody's got D'Ernest Johnson. If you want to pivot away and get someone down here who is cheap and maybe can beat D'Ernest Johnson or at least get close to him at a low percentage, Devin Singletary is the same price. If Zach Moss doesn't play, Singletary is an explosive player. He's in an offense that's really good, except for last week. The 1 week where Zach Moss didn't play, Singletary was 14 for 80. The Jets are allowing 4.7 yards per carry. Johnson obviously has a higher floor, but I think Singletary has a similar-ish ceiling, and I think it's if you wanted to get spicy in a tournament and maybe play that like maybe D'Ernest Johnson just doesn't do a lot. I think Singletary is the guy I'd go to. Obviously, it's risky; it's a tournament play only, but I think it's a viable one.
Oh yeah, it's absolutely viable. I would definitely, definitely playing Singletary if Zach Moss is out. That price tag is great, and he might be good enough. Like, okay, if D'Ernest Johnson, if Chubb ends up playing and we don't have D'Ernest Johnson, and if Zach Moss is out, Singletary is good enough for cash at 4,700.
Okay, right.
A running back who catches passes against the Jets for 4,700 and is also going to get the bulk of the carries too. Yeah. I almost forgot about Singletary. I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, everything you said. Great tournament play. Could even be a cash play if we don't have D'Ernest Johnson. But yeah, that Zach Moss news is important because I would really like Singletary for tournaments if he's out.
If Damian Harris and Ramondre Stevenson sit, do you entertain Brandon Bolden at 4,400?
Yeah, I think you could, but I don't have as much excitement as I would about Singletary.
I think that's fair.
But yeah, it makes sense, right? I mean, what do you think? I don't have as much insight to like the Patriots situation. It worries me, I guess. You never know quite what they're going to do, but they don't really have bodies if Harris and Stevenson were out. So it seems a little safer. In 4,400, he's a guy that catches passes too. So I think you got to have some interest. I don't know. What do you think about Bolden?
Yeah, I'm with you. I just New England running backs and me just don't really usually get along. But if they both sit, I mean, you got to think he's going to be involved. I don't think he's ever going to have 15 carries, but he might get 8 or something like that. And he had 8 last week against Carolina. I like Singletary and Johnson just so much more that I probably get there. But if Moss plays and Chubb plays and you want to get cheap, like he can work. You're going to have to hope for like 5 or 6 catches if you really want it to work great. Although at 4,400 isn't to be that huge, but I like the other two guys more.
Yeah, me too.
Let's talk about a few mid-range receivers here real quick. My favorite play in this range is DK Metcalf at 6,800. I love it this week. I love it with Wilson back. I think I saw that he had 33 targets in 4 weeks with Wilson, 23 in the 4 weeks without. I mean, their offense was just bad with Geno Smith. He had that big 85-yard touchdown on Monday night down the sideline. That was kind of, guy missed a tackle and boom, he was gone. No Jair Alexander for Green Bay is obviously a major factor. Deontay, Jamar Chase, Terry McLaurin all had big games in the last 5 or 6 weeks against Seattle. I feel like this game could be back and forth. I say this all assuming that Rodgers plays. Like I'm not as interested if Jordan Love plays because this game could get kind of slow. But you get DK Metcalf under 7,000 and Wilson playing. That's almost an auto play for me because I just think the upside is massive with him. And under 7,000, you just never get that price.
Yeah, I have nothing to add to that except the fact that I love it too, and we'll have plenty of DK Metcalf, assuming Russ and Rodgers both play. So under 7,000 is too cheap. No Jair Alexander. Should be a good game script for the Seahawks. Yeah, love it.
How overlooked will Deontay Johnson be with Evans and Metcalf right at the same price? Obviously Juju's out. If Claypool doesn't play, is that a place you're going to go?
Yeah, I really want to. It's hard for me to believe that he would be overlooked, but he would be because of these other options. I mean, yeah, he will still be rostered, of course, but it would be less so than usual. I mean,
and people hate the Steelers offense right now.
People hate the Steelers offense. The matchup is great for one at home against Detroit, but if we don't have Claypool and already know Juju, I think I would have interest in Deontay for sure.
Yeah, I do. I think I love Metcalf so much this week, and if Godwin doesn't play, Evans at 6,900, it's hard to get there. But I mean, in a tournament, that's a good reason to do it for a guy that you got to think Deontay's going to get to 12 targets this week. I mean,
yeah,
it almost has to work out that way.
Yeah, and I agree. Although I would rank him behind Evans and Metcalf. Still think he's a great option, though. Yeah.
And then we talked about Michael Pittman. He's 6,300, just rolling right now. Wentz is playing well. We talked about the Wentz-Pittman stack, works really nicely. Pittman has 4 touchdowns the last 3 weeks. Jacksonville's 30th in the NFL in yards per target. Like, it just works really well, too. I think that Pittman at 6,300 is very playable, very involved for what you get there.
Yeah, I agree. Not much to add. Great upside, great matchup. Makes sense to pair him with Wentz. Yep.
So a couple of play in that Wentz game, just because we're right there. Colts defense in the last 5 weeks. I just want to read these off to you real quick. Elijah Moore, 7 for 84 and 2 touchdowns. Week before that, A.J. Brown, 10 for 155 and a touchdown. Week before that, 7 for 100 and a touchdown to Deebo Samuel in the rain. Week before that, 989 to Brandon Cooks. Week before that, 9, 125 and 2 touchdowns to Hollywood Brown. This Colts defense is getting thrashed by receivers. If you could pick the right one, Marvin Jones is 5,800. I don't love Marvin Jones. He's under 35 yards for the last 5. But, man, if you want to come with a run back, I think that's the one I do at 5,800. He's pricey enough that I don't think anybody's going to play him at 5,800. I don't think anybody wants to click Marvin Jones for that price. But this Colts secondary is getting thrashed right now.
Yeah, you're right. I want to play a Jacksonville receiver for all the reasons that you've said. Yeah. It's so hard to pick. I've tried with Chenault. I brought him up a couple weeks ago. It's risky. I mean, Agnew's been catching touchdowns, or he caught 1 touchdown. Sorry. Yeah, I don't know. Like you said, 5,800 is a lot for a Jacksonville receiver. So I like it because no one is going to roster him. And it makes sense because Indy's been, getting shredded by these receivers, and it should be a great game script for Jacksonville having to pass. I'm just going to play Dan Arnold if I'm going to run back a Jacksonville guy. But I mean, I understand it.
Yeah, and I think he'll be very off the radar with all the options we talked about. I don't think anybody's going to want to click that 1,500, but I don't know. It's a good spot. It's a good game script, and I think that I'll probably get there in a couple of lineups. Not a lot down here, otherwise in the 5s and 4s. Jerry Jeudy had 8 targets last week at 5,300 for the Broncos, but they, with Tim Patrick more involved, with Noah Fant back, that passing tree gets spread out even more and more. But I do like Jeudy from a talent standpoint at 5,300. I think is playable. We mentioned Elijah Moore. We were talking about him thrashing the Colts. He's 4,700. He was 6 for 67 the week before that, so it was not a 1-week flash. I really liked Moore last week, in showdowns and season long. I had some Elijah Moore. His targets last week are 6, 6, and 8. They should be trailing the whole game to Buffalo, so I think that's playable at 4,700.
Yeah. Sorry, I just wanted to make just.
Are you putting Marvin Jones in all your lamps right now? So you were distracted?
No, but a point that I didn't bring up about Marvin Jones, you're likely going to use him on run backs with Wentz. Yeah. So Wentz is $2,000 cheaper than Josh Allen. So rostering Marvin Jones is like rostering Josh Allen with a $3,800 receiver. Yeah. But if you use Wentz, you can have a $5,800 receiver. So the salary essentially ends up being a little bit cheaper if he's in a cheaper overall stack. So yeah, it's more viable, I guess. As far as the other cheap options you mentioned, yeah, I think Judy's all right. Cole Beasley and Landry seem okay. They get a lot of targets. For tournaments, they probably need to get into the end zone. I don't know the Jets guys. Sorry, I was thinking about the Marvin Jones point. I didn't hear who you mentioned. Do you like any of the guys in the 4K range?
Yeah, I mean, I want to jump under 4,500. I just talked about Elijah Moore real quick, but that was it.
Under 4,500, yeah.
Under 4,500. Obviously, Tyler Johnson is in this mix if Godwin and Brown don't play. Brown's not going to play, but if Godwin doesn't play, even if Godwin does play and Gronk doesn't, I think Tyler Johnson could still be playable at 3,300. But some other names down here. Deontay Harris with the Saints is 4,000. He had 15 targets the last 2 weeks in that offense. Trevor Simeon is going to start again, and he has Deontay Harris has 13 targets from Simeon to lead the team when Trevor Simeon's been playing. So clearly Simeon and Deontay have something together. I don't know if they played, in the second squad together or practice, whatever it may be. They clearly have some sort of connection there. He hasn't done a lot with those targets, but he's very involved in 4,000 in a game where Tennessee's probably going to score some points. We hope, but you mentioned the Saints games are kind of gross, but playable at 4,000. If you wanted to go a cheap option in this Green Bay Seattle game, Marquez Valdez-Scantling is 3,500. He's back. Rodgers is back. Always a good thing for him. Can always hit a big play. The last guy I want to mention, we talked about Deontay Johnson, but if assuming Claypool does not play, James Washington, ghost from the past, a guy that we thought was going to be good a couple years ago, is 3,500. He's now played 34 and 41 snaps last 2 weeks. Last week he had 3 targets, but it was 1 for 42. He's kind of a big play guy if they can get him going. We know Deontay Johnson, they're going to hit underneath a lot of shorter routes. But he was 4 for 69 to 5 targets in week 4 when he played 49 snaps. It is a risky play that could be a 0, but I think James Washington, if he gets 6 or 7 targets with Claypool out, could be very very interesting at 3,500.
Yeah, that's who I was going to mention, and that's where I would go under 4K. It does seem like Claypool is going to be out. I don't know, it's only Friday, but
yeah, I think he's going to be out too.
Yeah, so James Washington 3,500, big play upside. Yeah, that's where I would go. We mentioned at the beginning of this podcast, Michael Gallup is 4K. That's okay too. I mean, it's tough to know. He's been out for so long. I don't know if I'd expect too much, but he's only 4K. But yeah, Washington is the guy I was thinking of. And then again, this is another one of those 150 things, or maybe if you make a lot of lineups, but it's McLeod on the Steelers as well. I mean, it's tough to know the roles of these guys, but I liked what I seen from McLeod and how they use him in different ways as well. And I mean, you don't have to do much for 3K. There's touchdown upside in that matchup for Pittsburgh against Detroit. So yeah, Washington would be the guy who I like most in that range, though.
It's really fun to say Ray as you're rooting for him too. It's a great name to root for. I love it. Let's talk tight ends real quick. We mentioned Kyle Pitts earlier. I think will be popular, although not cheap at 5,800. But I think in a run back in that game, a lot of people will play him. I like going a little bit cheaper. If you're gonna spend up at tight end, I actually like going a little bit cheaper than Pitts. I really like TJ Hawkinson this week at Pittsburgh. He's 5,500. He's clearly a good game script. They should be trailing the Steelers. He's clearly the number 1 target of the team. You look at his last 3 weeks. 11, 9, and 11 targets with 24 catches. It's been kind of quiet because he hasn't scored, but they are using the crap out of him right now.
Yeah, I agree. Pitts and Hawkinson are who I would spend for. And then after that, I think I'd go all the way down to Pat Freiermuth. Yeah. We were just talking about the Steelers and, having Claypool out and Ebron. Oh, I see that Ebron's back. Okay. So, still
that doesn't scare me that much.
Right. It doesn't scare me, but he had been out when Freiermuth has been having these big games, but Pittsburgh's so short at receiver and the matchup is great. So yeah, I like both tight ends in that game.
Yeah, Freiermuth has 20 targets the last 3 weeks. They've been using him a bunch, 3 touchdowns. I know everybody had the 2 touchdown game last week in the showdown, but he's second on the team to Claypool and end zone targets. At 3,900, I think that works too. It's just, you mentioned Dan Arnold a couple times, him or Dan Arnold both, involved enough that they under 4,000 work really well.
Yeah. Freiermuth and Dan Arnold are who I'm targeting in that under 4,000 range. But I also, like I mentioned when we were talking about the stacks, I think Seals Jones is still in play if you're targeting that game. And I also think Jared Cook's price just never goes up. I think he's in play too. He makes a lot of sense in those Herbert stacks. He's still seeing targets and he has touchdown upside too. So I think a lot of 3K tight ends you can play. And then
I assume Seals Jones for you is only if Logan Thomas doesn't play, right?
Ooh, actually, yeah. Thanks for bringing that up. I did not see that. Absolutely, that's only if Logan Thomas doesn't play. And
we don't know yet, so it's definitely worth mentioning Seals Jones. It sounded like Thomas practiced Monday, but it was sore, and so that we don't know now. But I mean, and maybe he's on a snap count. I think he'd have to be out for me to play Seals Jones too, though.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I got to make that clear. Logan Thomas has to be out to play Seals Jones. I mean, if Logan Thomas was active, I'd consider Logan Thomas, but I wouldn't consider Seals Jones then.
Yeah, I think that's where I fall on that too. And Logan Thomas is 4,000, so that's a good point. If he does play and you want to run back against the Bucs and he looks healthy, I'd have to hear some notes that he's not on a full snap count, but I mean, that's one of those things you got to check on, Saturday night, Sunday morning. Any super cheap tight ends? You mentioned OJ Howard earlier. You mentioned Cameron Brate. I think those are the guys that I had too. If Gronk doesn't play that are usable, I think it'd probably go Howard. I think Howard's a little more, upside to make a big play than Brady does. Although their touchdown equity is probably the same. It could work either way. Brady will throw to anybody down there. But that was kind of all I had under 3,000. Was there anybody else that you could punt at tight end?
Yeah, no, not for me.
And those guys are cheap enough that you don't need another option. I mean, those guys are so cheap.
Yeah, I'll probably just play a guy in the 3K range. I mean, if you really want somebody, I mean, Parham has 3 touchdowns in his last 5 games. He's seen 2 or 3 targets a game. They like him by the goal line, but again, I'd rather just get up to that 3K range.
Yeah, I'd probably just you never know in the end zone there. I'd probably just play Cook instead at 32.
Yeah, me too.
But yeah,
me too.
What about defense this week? I'm gonna let you go first. I had a good run of defense going. I finally struck out last week with Dallas. They did have 4 sacks, but they got thrashed by Denver. So I did not do well on the defensive side. So where I really picked quarterback and running back well last week, but defense was not one of them. Where are you going? There's 2 under 3,000 that I like, but I want to hear where you're going first.
Yeah, there's 2 under 3,000 that I like too.
All right.
First one's the Titans at home against the Saints. I don't know. I'm always going to like a decent home defense that's going up against Trevor Simeon and Taysom Hill, and Kamara's banged up. So there's really not much else to say for that one. And then I'll take the Browns too. Myles Garrett and that defense against a rookie quarterback. Yeah, Mac Jones has been good, but Browns are always an okay option. Let me see. Hold on. I mentioned Browns last week against Cincinnati, and they terrorized Joe Burrow and put up a touchdown, 18 fantasy points. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, they had 5 sacks against Burrow. That was in 3 turnovers. That was an impressive week of defense. I lied. I had 3 under 3,000. You did name 2 of them. Tennessee's probably my favorite one down here. You look at what they've done against good quarterbacks, and they sacked Stafford 5 times, Mahomes 4 times, Josh Allen 3 times. They have faced the gauntlet right now. They must be really fired up to face Trevor Simeon, finally a guy that's not an elite Hall of Fame level quarterback. They faced forced 8 turnovers last 2 weeks against these good players. I like what Tennessee's doing right now. Their defense is really rolling. I like that one a lot. You mentioned the Saints. You're probably going to run the ball out, not going to make a lot of mistakes, which is the only downside there. But I do think they're going to sack, get after Simeon pretty well, and maybe Taysom Hill come in and throw a pick 6 for us. The only other one I like down here is at 2,700. I think Philly is playable at Denver, mostly because Denver just allows a ton of sacks. They've allowed multiple sacks every game all year this week, and that's why I like Dallas last week. Didn't work, but Dallas did have 4 sacks. It's not like Denver protected Bridgewater all that well. So I think Philly's a really up and down defense. Some weeks they're huge, some weeks they're terrible. So always some risk with them. But 2,700 I think is playable there. Just think you kind of get that. They're going to get 3 or 4 sacks, and then you hope the turnovers kind of come on top of that. But Philly, Cleveland, Tennessee, I think are the 3 I'm going to have on most teams. If you want to get up a little bit, I think people will play Arizona against Carolina facing PJ Walker. Indy against Jacksonville, 3,700 against Trevor Lawrence. Always prone to some mistakes there. So I think that they're playable, but I think the teams under 3,000 I like almost as much. So I'll probably just go there this week. Yeah,
I agree. Yeah, nothing to add really. There's nothing that stands out too much at the top, and yeah, those options under 3K seem just as good.
Beautiful. Well, I think we kind of hit everybody. Went a little bit long, but hopefully people enjoy listening, so that's not a problem. Anybody else you want to talk about? Any other thoughts on your mind before we jump out of here? For unbelievably, we're at week 10 of the NFL season.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I think we covered a lot.
Yeah, I think it should be a fun week. I think, picking the right running back this week is going to be really important. There's a lot of plays, and, as you dive into it, find that little edge and find guys you like. But I think there's a lot of guys that are playable, which for me are always really fun weeks. So I'm going to let you and Smokey the Cat finish your discussion offline, because you guys are clearly doing some bonding there in the chat room. But I want to thank everybody for listening. We really do appreciate it. I know we talk and joke around a lot, but everybody that listens, we do really appreciate it. It's really fun that we're able to do this, and obviously you listening is a big part of that. If you could please rate or review the podcast if you enjoy listening to us, helps people find the podcast, goes a long way towards helping us out in a lot of different ways. So really appreciate that. Ryan, if you want to follow him on Twitter, is Ryan, last name BELONGIA. I am Scott Jenstad. Last name is JENSTAD. If you want to follow us on Twitter, we'll probably have some more thoughts as some of these injury things will clarify a little bit today and tomorrow. Especially in Cleveland with Chubb and in Tampa Bay with Godwin. a lot of guys that are questionable that will determine a lot of what we do in lineup. So if you want to hit us up on there, talk about how we're building as we get that news, definitely do so. Other than that, hope everybody has a fantastic week 10. We're back at you next Friday with week 11.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. Good luck, everybody.